Dear colleagues, we continue our working day and then give the floor to Principal Deputy Chief Monitor of OSCE Special Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, Alexander Hug.
Dear friends, good afternoon. Please apologize my delay today. Last week brought both good and bad news. Last week, like the week before, the SMM has recorded a decrease in the level of violence, 50% in fact. The Avdiivka, Yasinovata, Donetsk airport area still constituted approximately half of all ceasefire violations. But the decrease in violence was particularly pronounced there, with a 65% drop compared to the previous week. The level of violence in the Shirokine-Komiterno area remained high, constituting about 20% of the total, but unchanged from the previous week. There was an increase in the level of violence in the northern and western outskirts of Horlivka. Dear friends, I obviously welcome the overall decrease in violence. But a decrease inherently means that there has been violence, and that violence, dear friends, has not been without tragic consequences. On Sunday, our monitors in Komiterno came upon the bodies of two young boys, aged 6 and 7. I have actually met these boys during visits to Komiterno in the past. No one has targeted them. No one wished them to die. They were electrocuted when they touched electric wires downed by shelling. But without doubt, these two boys would be alive today if there had been no violence. On the same day, other monitors in Horlivka saw the body of a 55-year-old man killed in shelling. On Tuesday, our monitors facilitated adherence to the ceasefire in so-called DPR-controlled Sakhanka. There they monitored as bodies of so-called DPR members were removed. The next day, in an area southeast of government-controlled Piski, our monitors did the same. Again, the bodies of two so-called DPR members were removed. Statistics from the United Nations paint a similarly bleak picture on a broader level. Over 9,500 people killed since the start of the conflict and almost 22,000 injured. There is, of course, no worse consequence of this violence than such deaths and injuries, and for that reason, I rightly highlight them here. But we often forget the everyday relentless hardship faced by people. Every day, thousands of people, many of them elderly, are forced to spend hour after hour in long queues in the open in soaring temperatures. They need to cross the contact line to buy food and medicine, meet family and friends, or collect pensions. Many suffer from heat stroke and exhaustion. Words cannot fully convey what is happening at these checkpoints, so perhaps a few pictures may help. First picture, please. On this picture here, the scale of the problem is taken by our unmanned aerial vehicle at the Olenivka checkpoint. You see endless columns of cars there. Next picture. Here is what our UAV saw at the Stanica Luhanska checkpoint. Next picture. And this, the very long column at the Marinka checkpoint. Here, the lines are often chaotic, people and vehicles jostling for position, standing still in the burning sun, often with no water, food or toilet facilities. Here's Marinka again on the ground. Next picture. And if that were not enough, people queuing are faced with the presence of mines. You can see here the anti-tank mines just next to waiting pedestrians, again at the Marinka crossing. Thank you for the pictures. Whilst the violence that produced these consequences was indeed reduced last week, in the last 2 days we have been witnessing some very disturbing developments in a number of places. Underlying that we should never be complacent and that violence cannot be contained unless totally eradicated, there have been major spikes in violence at least 2 locations. Early Wednesday morning, between midnight and 4 a.m., our camera in Shirokine recorded 90 impact explosions, followed almost immediately by more than 20 outgoing multiple launch rocket system rounds. They were fired from a position 2 kilometers to the northeast in a north-northeasterly direction. Even more worryingly are reports from the Svetlodarsk-Debaltseve area. We are used to nighttime shelling in the area, but rarely during the day. Yesterday, however, was very different. Our monitors heard the sound of explosions throughout the day. In the space of just 2 hours, between 4 and 6 p.m., they heard over 160 explosions. Our teams in Debaltseve and even further east in western Luhansk also spent the day listening to and recording the fighting. We have been unable to independently verify it, but there are also reports that troops and hardware moved forward. At one point, fighting resulted in Svetlodarsk having no power. As a precautionary measure, we redirected our team there to stay overnight in Kramatorsk. The Joint Center for Control and Coordination has also told us that the Ukrainian armed forces have suffered casualties as of yesterday evening, 13 wounded and 2 killed in action. This is an ongoing and very fluid situation, and I cannot draw any conclusions at this stage. I would only appeal to the sides to show restraint. Instead of moving positions forward, the sides must disengage. They must pull back to points where the likelihood of capability of engaging one another is reduced. If we are not to stop such violence flare-ups and prevent the death and destruction that go with them, we need more than just words from the sides. We need actions that match these words. The sides, above all, need to take good faith actions. One side sometimes needs to take the first step. Suspicion and mistrust will inevitably be met by suspicion and mistrust. An act of good faith, however, will be met by a similar act in good faith, a development that can break the cycle of violence. And so, I ask the sides to show much more than restraint. I appeal to them to show bravery. Pulling back to agreed positions at certain locations in an agreed monitoring framework is not retreat. It is a brave, constructive decision that may allow us to put this bloodshed behind us. As usual, at the end of my statement, I would like to inform you about the latest mission numbers. As of today, the mission has 707 monitors, of whom 597 are deployed in the east. In addition, there are 306 Ukrainian colleagues and 88 other international staff working for the SMM. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Are there any questions or clarifications? Чи є запитання або уточнення? We don't have any questions, so the press conference is finished at this point. Thank you for coming and looking forward to seeing you next week. Дякую, шановні колеги. На цьому ми закінчимо робочий день.